You know that feeling? The one where you finally find the perfect place to call home? That sense of peace, of safety? My girlfriend and I, we had that. We found our dream house, a perfect little haven for us and our cat Bella. But our dream quickly started to feel watched. It began with a man staring from a dark window in the abandoned house next door. Just a blank, emotionless stare that went on for half an hour.
We tried to brush it off. Just a curious neighbor, we told ourselves.
But then one night they were in our garden, 3 of them, appearing from the shadows, just standing there watching us in the dark. What starts as a creepy feeling, a gut instinct that something is wrong, can quickly spiral into a nightmare you can't wake up from. This wasn't just about strange neighbors. This was the beginning of a relentless campaign of terror designed to make us feel powerless in the one place we were supposed to feel safe. And we had no idea how much worse it was about to get. You know that feeling of finally turning a key in a lock and knowing with every fiber of your being that you're home? That's what it was like for my girlfriend and me. We weren't just moving into a new house. We were stepping into a future we had spent years dreaming about. It was a charming 2-story place with big windows that flooded the rooms with sunlight in the mornings. We'd talk for hours about which walls to paint, where our photos would hang, and how our little rescue cat, Bella, would claim every sunny spot as her own. For the first few days, life was a blissful chaos of cardboard boxes, takeout containers, and the sound of our laughter echoing in the empty rooms. This wasn't supposed to be the beginning of one of those true horror stories. It was our sanctuary, the place where we were supposed to be safe to build our life together. But every dream has a shadow, and ours was cast by the house to our right. It stood in stark contrast to our own hopeful beginning, a skeletal structure caught in a permanent state of being renovated but never finished. The paint was peeling, weeds choked the driveway, and a general air of neglect hung over it like a shroud. The layout of our properties was a bit odd. A narrow path ran alongside our house, leading to our back garden.
Right next to that was the identical path for the abandoned house. The problem was there was no fence separating the two. The previous owner had torn the old one down with grand plans for a new one, but like the rest of the house, the job was left undone. It created a strange, ambiguous space where our property ended and the other began, leaving both of our back gardens uncomfortably open to each other. Behind that derelict house was another property, this one occupied. It was separated by a flimsy, worn-out fence, and from what we could see, several young men lived there. We didn't interact with them, but we saw them. Occasionally, when we'd pull into our driveway, we'd catch a glimpse of them using the abandoned yard as a personal shortcut. At first, we didn't think much of it. It was a bit strange, but we chalked it up to neighborly arrangements we weren't privy to. Maybe they knew the owner. Maybe they had permission. We were new, after all. We didn't want to start off by making assumptions, even if the whole situation felt creepy, like the setup for one of those "My neighbor is a stalker" videos you find online. Our very first night, after a long day of unpacking, we took a couple of chairs out into the back garden. We sat there in the growing twilight, just soaking it all in, feeling a profound sense of peace. It was perfect. Out of simple curiosity, we looked up at the row of houses behind us, their windows like dark, watching eyes. And that's when we saw him. In one of the windows, a man was standing, staring directly down at us. There was no hiding it. He was watching us, and he wanted us to know it. His face was a complete blank, devoid of any emotion, just an empty, unwavering gaze. The room behind him was pitch black, which made his silhouette even more disturbing, like a cutout against the darkness. We tried to laugh it off. "Guess we're the new neighborhood entertainment," I said. But he didn't move. He just stared. After 30 minutes of that silent surveillance, the peaceful feeling was gone, replaced by a cold knot of anxiety. This was starting to feel like one of those late-night horror stories, the kind you listen to when you can't sleep. We quietly gathered our things and went inside, locking the door behind us. The next few days were normal. I went to work. My fiancée battled the boxes, and the memory of the staring man began to fade. We convinced ourselves that we had overreacted, that we were just tired. A few nights later, feeling brave, we ventured back into the garden. It was a beautiful, clear night. That fragile peace was shattered by a sharp sound, the makeshift gate for the abandoned yard being roughly moved aside. We both fell silent, and then they emerged from the shadows. 3 men standing right at the edge of our garden. They didn't speak. They just stood there, watching us. The silence stretched on, thick with a growing sense of dread. It was clear they weren't going to leave. Finally, I found my voice. "Are you okay?" The youngest of the 3 stepped forward slightly, holding a large shopping bag. Without a word, he reached in and pulled out a box of laundry, detergent tablets. "Want some?" he asked, his tone casual, as if offering us stolen goods was the most normal thing in the world. We politely declined, the absurdity making it feel even more threatening. He just smiled a little, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and said, "Okay." Then, as silently as they had appeared, they turned and walked away. We scrambled back inside, our hearts pounding. It wasn't the offer of stolen goods that was scary. It was their audacity. They had walked onto our property, into our private space, as if they owned it. This wasn't just a bizarre encounter. We were all alone out here, and we both knew this was more than just a warning. It was the beginning of our own personal horror story. After that bizarre encounter with the stolen laundry tablets, the illusion that we could simply ignore our neighbors was shattered. What started as an awkward intrusion quickly morphed into a subtle, persistent campaign of intimidation, transforming our lives into a real-life horror story. Their presence became a constant weight on our minds. It wasn't just that they used the abandoned garden as a shortcut anymore. They started to linger. We'd see them from our kitchen window, standing in the overgrown yard, sometimes talking loudly, other times just staring silently towards our house. It felt calculated, a deliberate act of psychological horror, as if they were reminding us that there was no real barrier between their world and ours. They'd leave empty beer cans and cigarette butts near the property line, a small but clear act of disrespect. The message was clear. This space was theirs, and we were just living in it. I have to be honest here. My girlfriend and I are both just 20 years old. We were on our own, for the first time, trying to build a life in our dream home. The thought that we were being targeted because we were 2 young women, perceived as easy to scare, was a terrifying and inescapable conclusion. It was the classic setup for one of those true scary stories you hear about online, the kind that always start with someone being all alone. Their leering glances and brazen trespassing felt like a constant low-grade threat, a reminder of our vulnerability. We started changing our habits. We stopped sitting in the garden after dark, and checked the locks multiple times before bed. The simple joy of our new home was being eroded by a creeping sense of anxiety. One afternoon, I was in the front room when I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. 2 uniformed police officers were walking purposefully down the path alongside our house. Their focus was entirely on the abandoned property. They stepped into the overgrown garden, spent a few minutes looking around, and then left as quietly as they had arrived. It was strange, but validating. Seeing the police confirm what we already suspected. The men living behind us were trouble, the kind of trouble that gets law enforcement's attention. A few days later, there was a firm knock on our door. It was the police again. "We just wanted to inform you," one of them began, "that the residents of the property directly behind the abandoned house have been evicted." He explained there had been numerous complaints from other neighbors about antisocial behavior. It wasn't just us. They had been terrorizing the whole neighborhood. The relief that washed over me was so intense it almost brought me to my knees. It was over. The constant feeling of being watched, the intimidation, the fear, it was all finally over. That night, for the first time in weeks, we slept soundly. For a while, everything was perfect. We reclaimed our garden and settled into a peaceful routine. But that peace was fragile, and it was about to be shattered in the most violent way imaginable. One afternoon, as a storm began to brew, the sky turning a bruised grey, I was upstairs, enjoying a bath. Suddenly, a deafening bang from outside, louder than the first crack of thunder, jolted me from my calm. I threw on a robe and ran to find my girlfriend in the spare bedroom, her phone clutched in her hand, pointed out the window. Her face was pale with shock. "What is going on?" I whispered. She just held a finger to her lips, her eyes wide with a terror I had never seen before. She struggled to get the words out. A man, a complete stranger, had been standing in the abandoned garden. The second he realized she had seen him, he broke into a dead sprint, charging straight for our house. In a flash, he was at our side door, grabbing the handle and wrenching it back and forth with incredible violence. When the lock held, he ran back, seized the heavy broken fence panel, and began using it as a battering ram, smashing it against the windows of the empty house, one after another, the sound of shattering glass mixing with the now falling rain. We called the police immediately. They arrived, watched the terrifying video my girlfriend had recorded, raw, disturbing footage that looked like it belonged in her scariest home. Invasions caught on camera compilation, took a detailed statement, and then they left. They just left us there, alone at night with the sound of the rain in the background and the wind whistling through the broken glass next door. The old threat was gone, but a new, more violent one had taken its place. Our dream home had officially become the setting for our own true nighttime horror story. The violent aftermath of the window-smashing incident left a quiet so profound it felt louder than the chaos that had preceded it. After the police left, we were all alone again, standing in our living room, the distant sound of wind whistling through the shattered panes next door, serving as a chilling reminder. The sense of security we had so briefly reclaimed was gone, replaced by a raw, exposed vulnerability. That night's sleep was a luxury neither of us could afford. We lay in bed, side by side in the darkness, flinching at every creak of the house. It felt like we were living in the prelude to one of those late-night horror stories where the real terror begins when the sun goes down. A few nights later it did. I was jolted awake by a sound from outside. It was a whistle, low, sharp and predatory. It cut through the dead quiet of 2:16 a.m. like a knife. We both froze, holding our breath. Then came a new sound, a soft rhythmic tapping on our bedroom window. Tap, tap, tap. It was gentle, almost polite, which somehow made it 1,000 times more terrifying. It was the kind of creepy, unexplainable event you hear about in videos titled 3 Disturbing True Paranormal Stories. It was the sound of someone who knew we were in there, alone at night, someone who was patient.
Paralyzed with fear, our first instinct was to check the security cameras. My girlfriend fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling. Nothing. For some inexplicable reason, the cameras hadn't recorded a single thing. It was as if no one had been there at all. Shortly after, the noises stopped, but the presence remained, a phantom feeling of being watched. The next morning, we couldn't take it anymore. The house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a trap. It felt like the haunting of our new home. We threw a few things into a bag and drove to my mom's house, just needing one night of feeling safe. When we returned, the feeling of violation hit us before we even stepped inside. Our Ring doorbell, which had been securely mounted, was gone. It was lying on the doormat. The tiny SD card, the one that held all the footage, had been expertly removed. The message was crystal clear and chillingly disturbing. Someone had come back, not to break in, but to meticulously erase their tracks. They were smart, calculated, and they wanted us to know they could get to us whenever they wanted, leaving no evidence behind. Shaking, we called the police again. We explained everything. The woman on the non-emergency line listened patiently, but her response sent a fresh wave of ice through our veins. "I need you to listen to me very carefully," she said, her tone suddenly grave. "Keep every single door and window locked. The removal of a camera like that, it can be a sign that they are planning something more serious. They don't want their faces recorded when they do it." It felt like we were living through one of the scariest 911 calls ever recorded, but it was our reality. She confirmed our deepest fears. This was reconnaissance. For the next several weeks, we lived in a state of siege. The psychological horror was relentless.
The whistling would return at unpredictable hours. We'd hear strange banging from the abandoned house. We started wondering about the man. Did he even have a job? Or did he work the night shift, freeing up his nights to torment us? We filed multiple police reports, but with no new footage, there was nothing they could do. That hope was obliterated 3 weeks later. We were in bed when we decided to check the live feed from one of our cameras, and that's when we saw him. A man was standing on the edge of our lawn, bathed in the pale glow of a streetlight. His face was covered by a black mask, and a dark hood was pulled low over his eyes. He stood perfectly still, his arms spread wide like a grotesque imitation of a cross. His head was tilted at an unnatural angle, staring directly up at our window. We were completely frozen. It was a moment of pure, unnatural terror, like a skinwalker-level encounter. Because the camera was inside, it didn't capture audio, but we could see his mouth moving. He was speaking to us. After what felt like an eternity, he slowly lowered his arms and walked to the opposite side of the street. And there he stood for a solid 30 minutes, a silent sentinel claiming our peace of mind. Once he finally vanished, we called the police, our voices cracking. We explained what we had just witnessed. Their response was a final, soul-crushing blow. "Ma'am, it's not illegal for someone to stand on a public street and look at a property." They were dismissive. They made us feel like we were crazy. But we knew what we had seen. This was our true nighttime horror story, and we were completely on our own. It was the ultimate when the police don't believe you horror story. The police's dismissal of our fears was a different kind of violation. It wasn't just the man in the mask who was terrorizing us anymore. It was the system that was supposed to protect us. Their words, "It's not illegal to stare," echoed in my head. The perfect chilling title for a video called "When the Police Won't Help You." We weren't just being harassed. We were being gaslit. Sleep became a distant memory. For days we existed in a fog of exhaustion and hypervigilance. Our dream home had transformed into a cage, and we were the ones trapped inside. This was a relentless kind of psychological horror. The gnawing anxiety was a constant companion. We started arguing over little things, our nerves frayed from the relentless stress. The joy we once felt had been systematically stripped away, replaced by a suffocating fear. We were living on a knife's edge, waiting for the escalation we knew was coming. One late night, the inevitable happened. At 2:52 a.m., the silence was shattered by a notification on my phone. The camera app, motion detected at your front door. My blood ran cold. I sat bolt upright in bed, my heart hammering. I gently shook my girlfriend awake. "Someone's outside," I whispered. "Please, check the camera." She grabbed her phone, her hands trembling as she opened the app and switched to the live feed. And there they were. The image on the screen was a grainy night vision nightmare. Two figures, shrouded in darkness, were emerging from the side of our house, moving with a quiet, predatory confidence. Both wore dark hoodies and masks. They were shining powerful flashlights into our ground floor windows, methodically searching. And then, as one of them turned slightly, the flashlight beam caught something in his hand. It was long, metallic, with a distinctive, cruel-looking curve at the end. It was a crowbar. A choked sob escaped my girlfriend's lips. This was it, the moment we had been dreading. This was no longer just a creepy story. This was a home invasion about to happen. They weren't just trying to scare us anymore. They had come prepared to break in. We were watching in real time as two men cased our home, while we were trapped inside, completely helpless and all alone. We didn't scream. We didn't move. We just watched the screen, our bodies frozen in a state of pure, unadulterated terror. This was the very definition of a true nighttime horror story. After what felt like a lifetime, they exchanged a few quiet words and melted back into the shadows. The days that followed were a living hell. The harassment became a daily, almost ritualistic occurrence. The main tormentor would take up his position across the street every single day. We started to wonder if he even had a job or if he worked the night shift, which would explain why he was always there, tormenting us into the early hours. Sometimes he would just stand there staring for hours. Other times he would perform. He'd point directly up at our bedroom window. He'd wave, a slow, mocking movement that said, "I see you. I know. You're in there." Every single time we dared to peek through the blinds, he would be there, waiting. It was a calculated campaign of psychological warfare, and it was devastatingly effective. We were prisoners in our own home, afraid to leave but terrified to stay.
We kept calling the police, sending them clip after clip of the man standing there, pointing, shouting, holding a crowbar. We had a mountain of disturbing evidence, but nothing changed. Just earlier today, he was there again. Same spot, same blank stare. We recorded it just like we record everything now. Our phones are filled with a library of our own personal scary stories. We are absolutely gut-wrenchingly terrified. We don't know what he wants or when this will finally end. All we know is that our dream home has become the stage for a real-life horror movie, and we are the unwilling stars. Of course, here is the fifth and final part of the story, the unseen audience, completely rewritten to seamlessly incorporate your keywords and titles. I have ensured the language feels authentic for a US-based narrator, enhancing the psychological horror of the finale. Let me start by saying this. I know I'm not crazy. I understand how the story I'm about to tell you is going to sound. This is my own true horror story, and you'll probably think I'm paranoid, maybe even completely delusional. But I need you to believe me. I swear on my life, everything I'm about to share with you actually happened. It all began with a face, or more accurately, a collection of faces all looking at me in a way that was just slightly wrong. 3 months ago, I finally found the courage to end a 2-year relationship with my ex, Caleb. Our breakup wasn't just overdue, it was self-preservation. Caleb never hit me, but his abuse was a different, more insidious kind of horror. He was a master of psychological manipulation, controlling and possessive in a quiet, calculating way. After I left, I executed a complete disappearing act. I changed my number, nuked my social media, and moved. I thought I was finally free, all alone in the best way possible. Then I met the barista. It was a simple Tuesday morning. As I went to order, her expression shifted. Her head tilted just so. "Good morning, Sunshine," she said, her voice cheerful. I froze. Sunshine. That was Caleb's nickname for me, but he'd wield it like a weapon. "What's wrong now, Sunshine?" he'd sneer. It was his special way of making me feel small. I tried to rationalize it as a creepy coincidence. It had to be. But a few days later, it happened again. I was in a rideshare on my way to work. It was a dark, dreary afternoon, the kind of day that bleeds into a rainy night. As the rain in the background drummed against the roof, the driver kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. Halfway through the ride, he cleared his throat. "Ever figure out what you're running from?" he asked, his tone impossibly casual. Those were Caleb's exact words. This was no longer a coincidence. This was becoming one of those disturbing, true, scary stories you hear about online. It didn't stop. The world became a stage for Caleb's sick play. A woman at the grocery store whispered, "You don't get to just disappear." A man on the street muttered, "Still wearing your hair like that." Each encounter was like its own terrifying little chapter, a collection of short, scary stories starring me. How was he doing this? I started descending into a spiral of paranoia, wondering if he'd put an ad out on Craigslist, offering cash to strangers to torment me. Was this my own personal Craigslist horror story? Was he paying people who worked the night shift, people who could follow me at all hours? In a moment of pure desperation, I broke my own rule. I contacted Caleb's sister. I told her to tell Caleb to stop, that I knew he was stalking me. Her text message came back the next day. "I don't know what you are talking about. Caleb checked himself into rehab 6 weeks ago. He has no phone, no internet, no contact with the outside world at all." I didn't believe her. It was too convenient. That is, until a week later, when she posted a photo on her public Facebook profile. It was a picture of Caleb at the facility. He looked broken, holding a one-day sober chip. The date on the whiteboard behind him confirmed it. He really was there. He couldn't have been doing this. This was the plot twist that changed everything. If it wasn't him, then who was it? The realization was a slow, creeping horror that settled deep in my bones. How could all these random people know these intensely personal things? The feeling of being watched had transformed into something far more sinister. I wasn't just being observed late at night. I was being manipulated by an invisible, omniscient force, even in broad daylight. This wasn't a stalker. This was something else entirely, a true nightmare horror story that never ended. The faces were all different, but the puppet master was the same. And I had absolutely no idea who was pulling the strings.